Hello. This is Alex S. Johnson, and I'm the host of the Small Bear Show on YouTube. And my guest today is Mia Dalia of the Dalia verse, which when I first heard that term, it immediately made me think of Salvador Dali, and I don't know if that was intentional or not.
It wasn't, and just a small correction. It's Dalia, and it's Dalia verse.
Dalia verse. Yeah, I believe I did say Dalia verse, but if I didn't, thank you for correcting me. Yeah.
Um, Either way, I wanted to create my own universe.
Yeah.
I think it's not particularly humble, but I think when I started off as a writer, I wanted to tell stories, and when you tell stories, you create a world, and I just kind of built on that. And later, I sort of have fun with it now. I insert little nods to some other stories in my stories. So I feel like if people read more than one thing of my work, they might enjoy that sort of thing, like a little Easter egg. And if not, then I guess I'm just overly ambitious, but that's my little Dahlia verse.
I don't think there's anything wrong with being ambitious. If I had lacked ambition, that I wouldn't be working with people like David J. Haskins from Bauhaus. It's like having that ambition and knowing that you're ready to do it, right? Because just launching yourself out there into the world of into you know, promoting yourself as a writer, as a creative, or I hate the term content provider. I think we should kill that with fucking fire, right? Right? Just
It's terrible. It's terrible.
terminate with extreme prejudice.
There's something about the word content that's
Yes,
so general that it's off-putting.
right. Can you imagine like today if Jane Austen or you know, uh, you know, Gustave Flaubert were writing today, and they would, they and having to make TikTok videos and you know,
I've
or
created videos still. I'm just the only person. I just, yeah, it's challenging enough to figure out social media as is in Twitter. When I first started, it had the word limit, and I'm like, what am I supposed to say here? New book dropping. Like,
right, right, yeah. I mean, you could do a haiku, I guess. It would challenge you with form.
yeah, but that's what writing is for.
That's what writing is for. Exactly. Exactly. Such a good, really good point, Mia, because I've often felt I felt from the beginning that especially my friends would kind of pressure me to be on social media. I was very hesitant, and the reason I was hesitant is because I saw on Facebook when it was new that people would be talking about. They would literally be talking about like, oh, we just left the restaurant and here's a picture of our plates and here's like a crab salad sandwich that we just and here's some beer. And I'm like, this is getting into sort of Jean Baudrillard territory, right? Where the simulacra has replaced the actual experience, but to an absurd degree because it's not just the simulacra, right? Like where social media is entirely concocted. And then people play to the algorithms too. And then there's people like well, there's this I don't want to, well, I've already gotten in as much trouble as I'm ever going to get anyway. So there's this absolute knob named Matt Shaw who loves to attack me. And, even though he's nowhere near my class, I'm sorry I'm talking about this, but he writes entirely to the algorithm. So everything he does is sort of like, um, oh, what's trending on TikTok or something. And he's got all these sort of little acolytes who's like, oh yes, what's the latest thing? His latest novel is called Dick Nose. And that is so like on the nose as far as Bizarro. It's not even funny. There's like people, so people like I would much rather prefer to just, and I think this is something that kind of going into a rant here. Please stop me. But my I it's not a friend. I guess you would say he was everybody's friend, but Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead, right? And he his example to me was sort of like, well, he never changed. He never. This is I keep his sort of, you know, kind of just as for moral support, right? Um,
Yes.
right. He never changed to please people. He would, and people would say, "Oh, you're the father of heavy metal." He'd say, "We play rock and roll." And so I even got him a little. I got a little Lemmy to keep me company.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. You keep it in original packaging.
Yeah, yeah. And he was so sweet. He was just like a genuine, sweet, regular, normal person. You could talk to him. He had, I interviewed him one time, and it was around the Inferno album. And Slim Jim Phantom was, at this sort of presser, and he said, "Hey, that's Alex, that's Slim Jim Phantom." And I said, "I know." I said, "You should talk to him." I said, I know, but I'm talking to you." He's like, "He's great. He's one of the Stray Cats." And I was like, "Yeah, that's great." Um, and then he was bragging to me. He was bragging. Lemmy Kilmister was bragging to me that he had a guitar solo from Steve Vai. It's like, Steve Vai. It's like, yes, I've interviewed Steve Vai. It's like, yeah, but he's great, right? And he was literally playing air guitar in front of me. It's like, this is the man who wrote Ace of Spades. He's like a little kid. He was so into it. It's like, yeah, he's rocking out to this Steve Vai solo. To me, these people are like magical. And so they really inspired me. And so that's why I take a dim view of people who play entirely to whatever is current because, you know, Lemmy started out when as soon as he heard as soon as he heard Little Richard, he was like, yeah, that's what he was waiting for. Something that felt like, sex and felt like, life and intensity and passion. And he never changed. I mean, he was still rocking out into his 70s. And then sort of, and he had a very, very brief illness and then he died. He lived exactly the life he wanted to.
That's really something. But, if we all followed algorithms, we'd all be writing romantasy.
I mean, I dated this woman in Virginia Beach, and she was, because it was a weird long distance thing, and she um, had everything she wrote was to her readers would tell her what they wanted. And so everything would have to, she even wrote this weird hybrid called BDSM romance. And it was like, what is that? What is that? Because I know like BDSM erotica is like my friend Patrick Califia and I, have been in some books together. And that's different. You're talking about something where there's a happy ending. And everybody renounces, you know, fetishism and they live happily ever after. What? So,
I think that's literally 50 Shades of Grey.
right. That's 50 Shades of this. Ugh. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like for me, and I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts about this because this is one thing that I felt quite strong bond with Lucy Taylor about. We were both really into Clive Barker. She's a huge Clive Barker fan, and she was telling me that she had this idea for a story where a character is so turned on the idea of being murdered that she hired somebody to murder her. And I actually wrote that story, and it was in the anthology Noir Erotica. And
Uh, hmm.
and
Go
anyway,
ahead. So it was published.
it was published. Yeah, it was published. And so I just recently realized because I was looking back through our Blood Songs magazine interview from the 90s, and this is it also had a feature on Clive Barker.
Yeah, I see that.
And so yeah, that was where she was telling me this, and I realized, oh, that's where I got the name. So you have contributed, you are a contributor to my and Michael H. Hansen have put out a call for submissions for an anthology, excuse me, called Le Fantastique, a literary tribute to Clive Barker, and this is why we're talking. And so I would like to know, Mia, what is it that attracted you to Clive Barker? And also, I mean, you mentioned that you're into heavy metal as well. And so I'm kind of curious. And then there's this interesting connection too with Lemmy, right? Because of Hellraiser, the song. So I kind of I would like to know first how you first connected with the Barker verse.
I I had these old edition paperbacks of Books of Blood. I found them in an old used bookstore that I
Hmm.
frequented at the time, and it was so shocking
Hmm.
to me that it was one of those things where you're like shocked, but you can't look away.
Yeah.
And it's not what I write. I don't think I can write like that. I would say my writing is pretty much PG comparing to that very hard R of Clive Barker. But there is something so iconic about those
Hmm.
stories that
Yes.
you'll remember them vividly in details. And I could still flash back to it. I literally just quoted something from Books of Blood in one of the stories I was writing. There is something so iconic about it, and I even like movie adaptations of his work so very much. I have to say, everybody asks like it's one of those standard questions. What's your favorite horror movie? I always go with the original Candyman.
Yeah.
Uh, so and then I saw a tribute. I thought it was a stretch because I realized that my writing doesn't have the same edge, I guess. But I stretched, I reached, you know,
Yeah.
that's kind
Yeah.
of what you do.
You reached and you made contact, which is the most important thing. You know, I think one thing that people may have a certainly maybe in the past, not so much now, but people may have had the mistaken notion that I'm only into the most extreme, bizarro, hardcore stuff. And I'm really, my background is in literature, you know. And so my reference points are like, you know, Conrad and Shakespeare and and Rimbaud and and you know the sublime. And I think that Barker's love for those stories, like the Faust legend, you know, like William Blake, like, you know, he was a fan of and a friend of Ginsberg, and he was a very much of a you know, into, you know, people like Burroughs. And in fact, I believe In the Hills, the Cities, which we're trying to acquire, is from Burroughs. And believe it's from Naked Lunch. And so, and certainly, you know, when you look at those films, also, he is in terms of film, um, one Dario Argento is very much on his mind, you know, in as far as
Mm,
this is Maitland McDonough, and she is one of the contributors to our to Le Fantastique,
yes.
and this is there's actually, you know, you see the signature, right?
Yep. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Legendary.
So, and so she is, interestingly enough, and that's another thing that I didn't realize, but she also is a publisher and she's published like gay men's erotica, which she's gone back and retrieved some I guess some novels from the 70s or whatever, that are like vintage gay erotica, which is really fascinating.
Hmm.
So because and she bonded with Clive because of their shared love of Dario Argento.
That's that's interesting. Yeah, I've seen my share of Argento movies.
Yeah, and speaking of like Lemmy and Motorhead and or metal, I know you're a fan. One thing I love about Dario is is first of all they're the the murder set pieces are entirely unmotivated. The only motivation is I mean they are you're watching for the bravura cinema, bravura cinema. It's sort of like a toreador or something. It's like it's so unabashedly and unashamedly fetishistic. And the way he uses heavy metal to kind of spike the violence even more. So it's not sufficient that somebody gets their face ripped off with a special device that's designed to rip your face off and then strangled with your own intestines, but it has to be done to like, Accept or Iron Maiden or Motorhead, and so you're constantly like thrust into this. It's almost like he's a sadist with the audience. It's like you don't want to see this. You're going to avert your eyes, and so that's why he had the main character, the protagonist in opera, right, have her eyelids taped open, and then uh, pins inserted, beneath the tape so that she would rip her eyes out. I don't think that's actually true though, but it's as a premise. Right. And you mentioned iconic. What are to you the most iconic Clive Barker stories?
Ah, that's a good one.
And
I
also, what do you mean by iconic?
I guess iconic, I guess I mean in the sense of classic, because I feel like most of the time people, when they refer to something classic, they just mean old.
Right.
Like classic movies, sometimes they're just old. They're not necessarily good or they
Right.
love them, but they've been around long enough. To me, something is just timeless. Like I can revisit it now and I'll still have strong emotions. The one thing about this question is that I'm very, very bad with names,
Oh,
like
okay.
stories.
Um,
So I'm trying to think. Um, I'm gonna get back to you on that.
oh, okay, okay.
I'm
I
sorry.
no worries. I guess I will tell you one of the stories that's haunted me of his for years, ever since I first read it. It's called The Life of Death. Do you remember that one where this woman discovers this recess of bodies in, I believe it's England, in London, and this kind of these bodies that have been buried from the
Is that
plague.
where everybody dies? Where she's the only one who stays safe and everybody around her starts dying?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Yes. See, I just
Right. Yes.
never
And
remember the name of the story.
and it's so I remember thinking just how beautifully macabre and morbid it was. It was just unabashedly morbid. And it was like a death's perspective. It was like as close as you could possibly come to an alien perspective. One thing that I admire about him, and I think is he from this dimension? Because he seems to be keyed into mentalities and states of mind which most of us are not. And you just wonder, like, how does he access that stuff? It almost feels forbidden in a way.
But it's visual too. You can see it in his art. I think it's definitely he sees something we don't, which I think is what all the best writers and musicians have. So it's, and then we get to see it through his eyes, which is very rewarding.
We get to see it, and not only that, we get to play around and dip around in his world. And then and you have your world, the Dahlia verse,
Dalia verse, yeah.
Dahlia verse. And how did that begin?
um, how did I start writing?
Yes. Well, that's such a cliched question. I wanted to make it kind of more, how did the Dahlia verse begin? It's a slightly different question.
There. They actually, well, I started writing 4 years ago.
Mhm. 4 years? No, wait.
Yes,
4 years ago.
yes. I
Wow.
told you I'm prolific. That's why it
You
looks like,
see, you seem very seasoned.
oh, well,
I'm shocked.
thank you. Seasoned. I like it.
Yeah.
Um, 4 years ago, it was, like around the time of lockdown and coming out of lockdown. And
Yeah.
um, my wife and I were living in a very, very small apartment,
Hmm.
and she was working remotely. And most people would probably start losing their mind. I started hearing stories in my head, quite
Right.
literally. I
Right.
kept, there are stories, and she said,
Wow.
"Write them down." So I started writing them down, and at the time, I didn't even have my own computer. I would wake up at the crack of dawn and write until she had to get on the computer to work.
Hmm.
And then at night, I would write a little more before I fell asleep. And that's how I wrote my first novel, Estate Sale. And I haven't stopped since. And then once I got my own computer, it just got worse. And now I can't stop at all. Uh, but yeah, when I had to get on social media with all this nonsense, I knew somebody who literally dragged me on there kicking and screaming. Um, I wanted something memorable, and also I'm rather particular about privacy. So I thought, well, Dahliaverse. I'll
Hmm.
make my Facebook handle read Dahliaverse, which I thought was instructive
Hmm.
or fairly direct, but inexplicably it resulted in a lot of people thinking my name is Reed. I'm
Wow.
not knocking it, it's a great first name,
Right. Yeah.
but I'm rather attached to mine. And it's
Right.
funny every time like my birthday rolls around or something. I get so many happy birthday reads. It's become
That's
like a
funny. Well,
way to weed out who knows me, who doesn't.
I get the number of people who don't recognize George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, I keep saying that, I'm like, that's why I started putting the John Shirley blurb in there, just like people would say, "Oh yeah, it's that guy. It's not George." It's like, do people? It seems like we've lost those crucial, universal reference points anymore. And people don't know. I'm shocked. I mean, I used to think, oh, but then I realized that movie came out in the 40s or something, right? And that was referencing like the Depression, so maybe I'm just old. I don't know.
No, no, no. I mean, that movie is actually a classic.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
for real.
but it's actually funny because I've worked with another editor with the last name Bailey,
Yeah.
and I think my mind did not immediately make the connection.
Oh,
My main goal was just to make sure that I write to the right Bailey
right. Yeah.
initially.
Right.
But the moment I mentioned something to my wife, she goes, "Oh,
Yeah.
Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah.
Well, the reference is definitely alive.
Yes. Well, thank
Uh,
God. Uh,
yes, people get it.
okay, good. Okay, yeah, because the people who are like, "Dear Mr. Bailey," and I'm like, so it's like I wonder where they got the call for subs because on social media, very clearly identify myself as Alex S. Johnson, and so Michael H. Hansen, my co-editor and my good friend, and he's a very stable guy. Um, and so anyway, I like him so much, and I gotta just say a few words about Michael because you know he so initially when I brought him in, I believe the first anthology that I brought him on board with was it was initially called We Are Gregor, and it was a disability rights anthology. And because I'm disabled, I have multiple disabilities. I have um, dyscalculia, which is a kind of a sequencing processing disorder, a math related disorder, and it affects everything. And from time management to financial management to money to just um, anything. So, when people make a lot of assumptions about you based on whether or not you can do practical things, and it's like I can do things, but but not as quickly as other people. But there are other things that I can do that nobody else can do. And it's called being doubly exceptional. And I also have a neurodegenerative disease. So added on to that is extremely stressful. And I had experienced misdiagnosis from my doctors at Kaiser Permanente to the point where it wasn't just misdiagnosis. It was a cascade of misdiagnosis that I eventually discovered was deliberate. So I got on board, I was fighting it because I didn't what I needed. I wanted to help. I wanted help. I wanted to know what was happening to my brain, right? So I got in touch with a very renowned neuroscientist in New York named Dr. David Petrino. And also I discovered that the neuropsychologist who had misdiagnosed me initially was colluding with some other doctors in the Kaiser Permanente system deliberately to push me into um, psychiatry. And so that was how very, very interesting how this happened because I started doing these blogs on social media under groups like Kaiser Permanente sucks. I hate Kaiser Permanente under George Bailey. And as that's the origin story of George Bailey. And then over time, I changed it to um, Al, Al, John Stevenson. It's my dad's name is Steve Johnson, so I was just inverted my name. And that's under John Stevenson. That's when a woman named Carrie Lee Chrome entered the picture. And when I saw that she friend requested me, this was about 3 years ago on Facebook, and I thought, wait a minute, I know this name. Name is quite familiar, right? Talk about iconic. Talk about iconic, right? And I was like, looked it up on Wikipedia or whatever, and I was like, okay, so this is the woman who, when she was 14 years old, she introduced her friend Joan Jett to Kim Fowley, thus creating one of the most influential bands in rock and roll history, the Runaways, right? Um, and and she told me, she said, Alex, you're my hero. And I was like, what are you talking about? You're literally you're literally Carrie Lee Crum. And she said, no, because you wrote these blogs about your experiences with these doctors, and you're my hero. And then I discovered that she too had been misdiagnosed and abused by this Kaiser system. So we became pals. We bonded over initially over mistreatment by doctors. And then I told her, yeah, I'm a huge fan of yours. I'm the world's biggest Runaways fan, and it's like, it's like having access to the mind behind songs like Waiting for the Night, California Paradise. I mean, these are like, I spent years listening to, the Mercury Records anthology album of the Runaways, and I own the film, and I'd watched it so many times, and I read the book, Sherry Curry's book, Neon Angels, and it's like, oh my God! But now I get the real story.
Right.
And she said, check this out. She said, Alex, I'm writing these stories. Would you like to see some of my stories? Would you like to work with me and like edit my stories? And I'm like, you write stories. You write stories. I was like, oh yeah, I've been writing stories for years. I've got all these notebooks. I'm like, you have notebooks? It's sort of like the treasure of the Sierra Madre or something. It's like discovering another aspect of a creative genius who like Salvador Dali or Patti Smith or somebody who works in multiple area or John Shirley who writes for film, obviously The Crow, for Blue Oyster Cult, and he writes for the comics and as well as novels like Wet Bones, right?
Right.
And Black Butterflies, the collection, whatever. So I was like, wow, so okay, so send me your stories. Well, it wasn't until about 2.5 years later she finally started sending me stuff. And then I was telling her about the Black Sabbath book. I said, Carrie, you wouldn't happen to be a fan of Black Sabbath. I know, I mean, you're like this iconic fucking musician, right? And she said, of course I am. Of course, I'm wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt as we speak. I said, so would you like to write me something for my anthology, my Black Sabbath anthology? She says, yeah. And I said, what song would you like to take on? Children of the Grave. And so that became like that started this, and then we started like we wrote some songs together. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. And so the first thing I published of hers was in the White on White, a literary tribute to Bauhaus. And that was this poem, his original poem. And I didn't mean to like go on and on, but it's so like, you know, a lot of people these days, I feel like I'm sort of like this elder statesman because people don't realize that I don't think that people have enough respect for, they're barely aware of of these legends who really, but for Carrie Lee Chrome, but for Lemmy, but for well, Lemmy taught uh, what's his name? Sid Vicious how to play bass. Okay. And he was a roadie for Jimi Hendrix. So there's all this connective tissue with that goes way, way back with the people. And then, Jimmy was taught by Albert King how to, or Buddy Guy. Buddy Guy, taught him how to play guitar, really. And he was working for Ike and Tina Turner. I can, whatever, Ike Turner review, right? So there's all these people and then he was turned on by like, people like Little Richard, right? So there's this legacy, and then Ronnie Spector, you know, sort of formed the Ronettes, and then Carrie was into that, but also she's into Screamin' Jay Hawkins, right? And so I think it's really interesting that I've had the great good fortune of sort of being at the intersection of all these I've known these people. I worked with these people and intimately, and so we're presenting, a lot of, and I don't mean to knock people like Joe Meinhardt. He certainly does an incredible job, incredible job. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of people who do these anthologies the only way they can put together anthologies with with the table of contents that they do is they'll acquire, you know, a reprint like a Stephen King reprint, right? Or whatever, right? Most of their stories will not be by names. There will be, but they acquire, and most of the budget goes into getting a reprint from Stephen King or whatever, you know. My my anthologies, not to brag, but they're like maybe 98% original stories, right? And original poems. Ethan Maroulis from Spawn Ranch and Black Tape for a Blue Girl wrote a sequel to The Three Shadows,
Nice.
right? Is I mean, you know, Carrie Lee Chrome wrote me an original song. Um, Tara Vanflower wrote me an original lyric. Poppy Z. Bright, Billy Martin wrote me a forward. Caitlin R. Kiernan gave me a deep cut. And then David J. Haskins, for my Burroughs tribute, gave me an original poem, which to me is which is as it is. I immediately recognized there were Easter eggs. You're talking about Easter eggs. There were Easter eggs to Bela Lugosi's Dead in this poem. And I was like, damn, this is culturally significant, right? It's not just, we're not just publishing sort of, and it's in its true love because I don't have any money. I don't have a budget. I just have friendships and and camaraderie with people. That's all I have because I can't I offer people an honorarium. Some people, I'm not going to say their names, but fairly well-known publisher who's also lives in Sacramento, they don't even pay. You know, they don't even pay people. And they have people like Graham Masterton. We have Graham Masterton, but we pay Graham Masterton. You know, we're certainly not going to say, hey, Graham, I want you to write things for free for me. I want, hey, Lauren Soros, you know, Ella Soros, you know, Bram Stoker award-winning author. I want you to write some free shit for me, right? I just I can't imagine the mentality of these people, and they censor you too. I won't name names, but these this person who lives, you know, like 20 minutes away from me censors their and they have to keep it PG-13. I'm like, I have to say, hey, like Caitlin R. Kiernan says, there's, you know, there or Clive Barker, there are no limits, there are no rules. You don't even have to be linear, right? You can do what you want, and we'll publish it. So I didn't mean to rant and rave, but
No, no, it's fine. I'm actually I'm gonna be in an anthology with Caitlin R. Kiernan, and it's when I first saw it, I was so it's so neat to me now to get to work with this writer, to not even to work, but like at least to share a table of contents with
yeah,
people who've been reading for so long.
right.
It's very very exciting. But yeah, I definitely read a lot of the names that you have worked with. I think I've read everything Graham Masterton has written.
Yeah,
I think I had a collection back when I collected books. I had just about all of his paperbacks, the really old school ones.
yeah. It's
And
really exciting.
it's, it really is. It's one of the things, like, I know they say you should never meet your heroes, but in this business, as you work, you kind of get to meet some of them.
Sure.
And it's very exciting. It's definitely very exciting. Like, I'm very excited to be on board with this anthology. And
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to have you, you know. Like, you know, I remember I think one of the reasons I just always believed in treating people nicely and just you never know. You never know. Like I remember my first time out was really I attended a few Stokers and few Stoker we didn't have Stoker cons. It was just like the business meeting for HWA. And I'd, you know, one of the really memorable ones was like, Skip and Spectre showed up at the same time after they'd broken up, and Harlan Ellison was there, and Richard Matheson was there. Richard
Oh,
Matheson was the guest of honor at this Stoker Awards. And I was sitting there. I had a full bladder. I was like, "Oh my God, I have to piss like a racehorse." But I was like, "Oh my God, oh my God." And my wife was like, "Hey, no longer." Anyway, long story. But uh, why don't you just? I'm like, you don't understand. You do not understand. This is the man who wrote, who is a legend, who wrote I Am Legend. He wrote, he wrote the incredible Shrinking Man. He wrote Hell House. Do you realize how important this guy is? He wrote The Twilight Zone. Like most of the episodes that weren't written by Rod Sterling were written by Richard Matheson. And and no, I'm not going to go pee. I would probably soak my pants before I would miss Richard Matheson. He wrote, you know, Big Time Return. He wrote, What Dreams May Come. It's a tribute to his wife. I was just like, no, no. And then you had Harlan being Harlan, and being just this wonderful gadfly, like a Socratic type of gadfly. He was always talking about the right things. He was always outraged about the right things. Where we miss you, man. We miss you, Harlan Ellison. Wherever you are, you know, thank you, right?
I would have been so starstruck. I'm a huge Matheson fan, like huge. I still remember when I first discovered him at a local library. They
Yeah.
had a bunch of his books, and I think I must have worn out his collection, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. I just kept borrowing it and borrowing it.
Yeah.
He is probably like one of the three top short story authors who taught me how to write short stories in so much that I was taught when I wasn't really taught. I just
Yeah.
read a lot and then I'm like, I'm gonna do this. And I started doing it. But there's definitely such an inimitable style. Yes. I definitely understand why you would stay in your seat.
There's another guy. Well, actually, there was several. I didn't, I like good writing. I mean, my friend Lillian Chernica, she's not a splatterpunk, right? I was reading, when I was an undergrad at UC Davis, I used to get the year's best horror edited by Carl Edward Wagner, another to me icon. I mean, so much love for the late Dr. Wagner, right? So much love. I mean, he's just man, and so you'd have names like Paul M. Salmon, like Lillian Chernica, who's that guy? Steve Resnick Tim. And I would get out those Charles Grant, you know, um, anthologies like Whispers and from the library, and I would read them over and over and over again. I couldn't get enough. I loved how they made me feel.
I get that. They're very, very exciting. I don't know, like, it's hard for me to find sometimes similar things in modern horror, in
Yeah,
what's being published right now. I think, especially in short stories. So I'm always on the lookout, even though I've been kind of mostly just reading nonfiction, but I'm
yeah,
always keeping an eye out on what's going on with stories. And I do write so many of them in so many different genres. Like people
yeah.
mostly think of me as a horror writer, but I write across the board. And
So do I. Yeah.
I do noir, which is inexplicable because I don't read noir, so I have no idea
Right.
where that came from. I have I got shortlisted from Crime Writers Associations
Oh
last
wow,
year.
that's right. You did. You did. You did.
Yeah,
So
I
tell
got
me
it.
tell me about that. Yeah.
That was a complete surprise when I started writing noir. I'm like, I didn't even know where to go try to publish it because I
Right.
only hate horror, and because that was like my second year writing or something,
Right.
I Googled where to submit it
Yeah.
and started submitting them. And I submitted one that was purchased by Mystery Magazine of Canada.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, yay, I'm an international author now.
Yeah.
And that was the same story, I think, that I submitted to Bang, the noir anthology that
Oh,
Headshot
wow.
Andrew Hook was publishing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, but I gotta go with them because they pay more. And he said, do you
Yeah.
have another story? And I'm like, do I? And I showed him another story and he loved
Yeah.
it. And I was like, okay, well, you can publish this story. And
Sure.
he did a beautiful job. It's such a lovely book. And bang was exclamation point. And then I had no idea that he nominated a bunch
Oh
of
my
stories
gosh.
for for the Dagger Awards.
Yeah.
So I was hugely surprised. I haven't received any prizes or been nominated for anything. I kind of, because of my oversized ambition, I was saving myself for the big awards.
Right.
I kind of didn't submit to anything like indie awards type of thing.
Yeah.
And this was a big time thing. And all of a sudden he starts posting that my story is long listed. And I'm
Huh?
like, oh, neat. Uh,
Wow.
and then I think a month or two later, I remember I was just sitting on the computer and working, and I checked Facebook, and he posted that it got shortlisted. So
Wow.
my story and five other stories, and my name is right next to Lee Child, who did the Reacher novels. That's
Okay.
a TV show, and I was like, "What?" So it was
Oh,
very
oh,
surreal.
Lee Childs?
Yeah, Lee Child. He does the
Holy crap. Because I'm a huge fan of mysteries. I don't know, that's one, if I don't really read horror, I mean, or genre fiction at all. But when I did, and this is more before pre-brain disease, but I'm the world's biggest fan of police procedurals, of crime fiction, of Raymond Chandler, of Robert, Spencer, of just basically what was the one? There was a long-running BBC show where this guy, he's a kind of an autistic um, sort of behavioralist, behavioral profiler who who has an uncanny ability to solve crimes and detect who's the whatever the unsub or whatever you call it.
that
And
actually seems like a lot of shows now.
right, his name was like Tony something or other, and it was a very the whole the whole thing was he had a very odd kind of autistic affect, and the stories were quite amazing. Um, anyway, I love crime fiction. I'm an addict of crime fiction and true crime.
Oh well, you should read my noir.
I
um,
will definitely read it. Yeah, just send me.
I didn't win, but also Lee Child didn't win. Another
Right.
person, but it was a huge honor to be nominated, and definitely a very good ego boost. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I have tons of noir. I'm actually delighted to say that I finally got into my dream market. So I set out goals for myself.
Yeah.
Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine was my goal.
You got into Mystery Magazine. Get out.
My story will be in the fall issue.
Yes. Congratulations. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Congratulations. That's so amazing.
Yes, that's. I have actually a lot of things coming out this fall, but that one is very special because that took me a few tries, and when I finally got in, I was just like
Y-
thrilled.
And you said you're in something with King too.
Um, yes, but I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Oh, okay. Well, since you're not allowed to talk, so this will give me. I'll be right back. I have to get a book. I feel like a kid in a candy store with writing and publishing. I'm like I there's very, very I still get excited. Okay, so this was something that my friend Thomas Roche put out in 2001, and I think it was mostly original stories, and it's called Noir Erotica 3 Stolen Kisses. So it's erotic crime,
Hmm.
right? Erotic crime. Um,
Yeah, I see that.
right. And there's Thomas. We grew up together basically. And so these are some of the names that I wound up working with these names too. Like Allison Tyler, Amelia G, who did I worked with separately on some magazines. Clint Catalyst, let me see, Brian Hoge, right? Brian Hoge is really, really big name. Michael Thomas Ford, M. Christian, Maxim Jakubowski, P.D. Kasich, right? I'm also in the HWA uh, Poetry Showcase anthology with P.D. Kasich too. Ido von Belkom, right? I remember when I was reviewing things for Death Realm magazine, and I would review a lot of Ido von Belkom, and I got to be, you know, right at, you know, be an anthology with him, and then Simon Shepherd, Lucy Taylor, right? Tom Piccarelli, who's no longer with us, Kate Bornstein, who is like kind of a really renowned kind of transgender author, and so so I wound up working with and commissioning original work from people like Lucy Taylor. Another person that I this is just because you weren't allowed to say which anthology you're in with a certain master of horror. But congratulations, and this is really great, right? It's really great. So, what else are you working on now?
Um, I have several things coming out, so I'm kind of doing. I'm simultaneously working on getting new work out and republishing some older work because um, I wasn't. I didn't know what I was doing, and I made certain mistakes. And now that I have a better idea of what I'm doing, I am going back and rectifying them. So I redid my debut novel Estate Sale. I did a brand new edit. I added like 6,000 words. I found a wonderful publisher for it, and that should be coming out soon in paperback, ebook, and I'm hearing audiobooks, so I'm psyched for that. My debut collection, Smile So Red and Other Tales of Madness,
I
is
love the title, by the way. I love the title. Smiles Are Red and Other Tales of Madness. Sounds iconic. It sounds like something that's been around for, it sounds like something that's been, it sounds like a something, you know, like, growing up, you go to the library and you see these austere old titles, right? The worn hardcovers, maybe a little bit tattered, and they feel great. They feel like they've always been there. Like,
that's That's kind of what I was going for. If you actually look at the cover of the paperback, it's not in
mhm.
hardcover, but the paperback does have tatters around the edge. It has wear, kind of as a nod to that. But Smile So Red was one of the first things I've ever written. It's a little novella, and I self-published it at the time. And it's also the only corner of Dalia verse that I revisit occasionally
Hmm.
and nod to it. So I collect. So then I wrote a bunch of other novelettes, and I thought, well, I'm going to collect them, and I
Yeah,
made the collection. It came out a year and a half ago from Manucci Press, and now I'm reissuing it with Bridget's Gate Press. That's
that's
coming out July
great.
1st.
That's great. I'm
So
really
I'm
excited. I really am excited for you because just having a and you're ambitious like I am, so I love that. So have you always been like this? I mean, for
I've never had an ambitious bone in my life.
so
This is
okay,
the
so
weirdest.
why for writing you seem to have sprung out of nowhere, just
No, it just showed up. It's surprising to me too.
yeah,
Frankly, it's exhausting if you
right,
just
yeah,
like discovering ambition.
right,
So I guess I'm a late bloomer. I don't know, but yeah. So Smile So Red's coming out. I'm psyched for that. And if people are watching, it's currently on NetGalley. For the first time, my book is on NetGalley. I'm very excited about that, so people can request it. And I have another novella coming out hopefully soon. I'm very excited for it. It's going to be beautiful, hardcover, signed.
oh nice,
I can't quite discuss the details yet because it's been slightly delayed, but it's also from one of my dream publishers.
yeah,
So, and dream editor I make from my lists, from my famous lists. So,
yeah, oh
uh,
so nice.
so and then come fall, I think I probably have like about half a dozen stories in different anthologies because they all target around Halloween.
Yeah, which is literally my birthday, by the way. I just
Oh,
wanted to share that with you. Yeah,
well, I'll remember that. I'll wish you a happy birthday.
yeah,
I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday.
yeah.
I specifically had my second novel, Haven, released for
Hmm.
Halloween.
Yeah,
So
so cool.
yeah, very excited for all of that. It's been busy, but hopefully my name will just be everywhere. I'll just annoy people into adoring me. That kind of thing.
That's what I did when I started. I so when I first met, Thomas Roche, he was going to like this our local community college just to get the basic stuff out of the way because you don't have to pay for like I mean he wound up going to UC Santa Cruz and but so so I know I he constantly this was back in the days of the dot matrix printers, right? So he would constantly, you know, he would have a brand new printout, and he'd give me these huge, so sort of like you'd have to like, strip them apart to read them, and they sort of like it sort of almost like reminds me of like a like a mythic Jack Kerouac scroll thing, right? Because they were all, you know, to
Really,
like attached to each other, right? And because they would come out of the printer that way. And and this was very, very, very primitive now in retrospect. We didn't even have the Macintosh was yet on the horizon. Um, Movies like Blue Velvet were brand new.
1986.
1986. Okay, and then one of the things that I will never forget was that I and my then girlfriend at the time, who wound up becoming an English professor, Pasadena City College, would watch a film called let me find it because I'm very visual and I like also just the sheer frisson of it. So I'll be right back. Just a second.
Sure.
Okay, so we watched this movie. Well, then, now my friends and I don't know if you're a Bowie fan at all, but we're doing a Bowie book. And
Yes, I'm a Bowie fan.
okay, so You look like you're a Bowie fan, okay? You
I
look
don't know what that means, but thank you.
well, you look like you could have stepped out of a Bowie video. I mean, you got the haircut, got a certain Bowie-esque quality to you.
Thank
And
you.
in fact, you look a lot like this character,
Oh, I remember this. Yeah.
right? And so um we were huge fans of Bowie. And my little group that I knew Thomas Roche through. And actually, my first girlfriend, I met him through my first girlfriend. He was dating my first girlfriend that I had in high school. And there was a whole discovery of, whatever queerness and whatever that kind of opened up a lot of, you know, possibilities for me. Let me put it that way. And so he so 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 me and my then girlfriend at the time we'd she taped me off a lot of her Bowie albums, and then we would watch this film a lot and just kind of be exploratory and whatever, and you know always the opening credits, that there's something kind of, it's even more than iconic. It's kind of magical. It's spiritual for me. The opening, MGM, right? It's MGM Metro Golden Mayer Presents, and it's like you have that, like, that does dub rhythms. It's I don't know if it's bossa nova. I actually did this whole thing where I did a deep dive on Bela Lugosi's Dead, but it's a dub song, and David J describes it as 14 minutes of dub, right? It's black music, it's reggae, really, is what it is. And if you listen to it, I mean, if you listen to it like over and over again for like 40 years, like I have, like, wait, okay, so that song, it's reggae, right? And even the rhythms and the kind of intonation patterns of Bela Lugosi's Dead, it is a reggae song, but it is also a cut up. It's a cut up, it's a Burroughsian cut up.
Hmm.
And so, okay, so it's like Peter Murphy, right? He's like, okay, Metro Goldwyn Mayer presents, boom, um, and then there's Peter Murphy in a cage inexplicably, right? In a goth club. Why is he in a cage? Well, who the fuck cares? It's Peter Murphy. And he's scrawny, he's rail thin, he's very coked up, and he's like, you know, like that. And he's a vampire, and he's iconic, you know, his did you know that James O'Barr modeled The Crow after Peter Murphy? That's another
I
interesting.
didn't, and I feel like I should have. Interesting.
Originally, it was going to look exactly like Peter Murphy. So he's like that, and then David Bowie, and it's like you feel your heart skips a beat, right? Because it's Bowie, and then
Right.
he's a vampire, and then he's up there and he's smoking cigarettes, and he's up there with Catherine Deneuve, and they're stalking Anne Magnuson, and you're like, it's Anne Magnuson, right? And it's like, and the song, as tongue-in-cheek as it is, it summons up this entire universe of melancholy, lust, and kind of decadence, and it's this sort of a feeling that you'll never quite recapture. It's sort of part of your life when you're in your 20s, and you feel like you'll never do anything. You'll never get laid. You'll never be successful. You'll never publish anything. You're just going to die of complete and utter failure. So you're listening to this song, and it's goals. It's goals because it's everything you want from life, right? Catherine Deneuve, who's still around, Susan Sarandon, who's still around, Peter Murphy's still around, and David J. Haskins is still around and still doing amazing things. And we got to publish him. Not only that, but he gave us permission to republish the lyrics to the day that David Bowie died in Moondust Will Cover You, a literary tribute uh, to um, to David Bowie, which does features yet another deep cut from, my friend Kate Kiernan. It features a an article by my pal Ken Goffman, aka Are You Serious, of Mondo 2000 fame. It's got my interview with Tony Zanetta, as in Diamond Dogs, Main Man Entertainment, Ziggy Stardust, and the from Mars Road Tour, right? That was I did that and interview. Um, let's see. So I did that interview, and then we just got like yesterday. I got an original piece from Hannah Breshard, the Space Cadet,
Hmm.
and oh, we have Tara Van Flower. We have I. There's so many iconic people in this anthology. I keep forgetting who we have. Oh yeah, we have. Oh, we have. So and we have John Palisano, an original story by John Palisano. So if you want to contribute to that book, it's still. I mean, we're there's so many stories that we're putting out too,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we're waiting for, who really wanted in on that. Oh, Nicole H6. I keep forgetting Nicole H6. So I just have to say for our one or two viewers here, but we've had her on the show many times, and Nicole is definitely very strong, very important asset to Nocturnicorn Books. If the name sounds familiar, you may have heard of a band called Motley Crue.
Yes, I get the Nicky Six.
Yes. So she is the daughter of Nikki Sixx, but she is
Okay.
completely different. I mean, she's completely a complete original filmmaker, screenwriter, director, actress, comics writer, journalist, artist, and and um, and a really compassionate for animals. In fact, she created a collective paw.
Oh, good. Good. I'm very, very happy to contribute to that. Oh, love animals.
I love, and I also worked with, the late Betty White and Tom Sullivan on, it's called The Leading Lady, Diana's story, which they had a companion animal called Diana that they shared, and I was worked with Tom and Betty, and I edited one of his books too. So I was really fortunate to work with, these amazing people. I mean, they're household names, like everybody's heard of Betty White, and she was a huge and they even put out a recently they put out a postage stamp of her with her paw earrings, So, and you'll see that the logo of our Nocturnicorn books is two things. It's one is well, I'll show you. This is my latest um, collection,
Nice.
the Doom Hippies Volume 3, and I got a great blurb from Anna Tambor.
Yeah, I see that.
Right. And so our logo, which was done by Adrian Baldwin of Phantasmagoria magazine, is a collective paw.
I noticed that when I first saw the submission call, and that was one of the reasons I was very attracted to the call. I've every chance I get, like I've worked twice with Dragon's Roost Press on different anthologies because they donate part of the proceeds to the dog charity.
Yeah, it's so important. So yeah, let's talk about a collective paw and let's talk about animals. Let's just, you know, I don't even know where to begin. I just like let's talk about animals.
Well, I've lived in big cities my entire life until about 3 years ago
Yeah,
when we moved to the suburban wilderness where we presently are. And
right.
we live across the street from the woods, actual woods, where we go hike all the time with actual animals. And it is so weird still. It's so weird. The other day we walked, and ahead of us walked a deer, and the deer didn't care that we and it just kind of walked along the same path. And we have all this wildlife, and it's been fantastic. Actually, Smile So Red and Other Tales of Madness came about from this move. My brain needed something to process the
Yeah,
shift from city to suburbs,
right.
shift city to nature. And yeah, that one doesn't have so many animals per se
Mhm.
because I would never do anything to animals in my
Right.
city, wherein I'm very comfortable doing terrible things to people. In so, but yeah, so from the same shift, some of the things about living outside the city
hmm
are strange, and I miss the city, but the animals just being out here, it's so fantastic.
Yeah,
Not, I don't think I'm ever gonna get tired of it. And yeah, I love animals. I support, I donate, and I hope people will buy this charitable in droves, literally.
yeah,
Such a great cause. I mean, I think that's one of the few things in this day and age that we can all agree on comfortably. That
comfortably. Yeah.
animals, like
Yeah.
whatever you think of people, animals are awesome.
Animals are awesome, and we have so many. I mean, we have. And you've seen my table of contents. That is just a drop in the bucket, right?
Oh yeah,
We have Billy Martin, Poppy Zebright, Caitlin R. Kiernan, Lauren Soares, um, John Shirley. Um, uh, 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 I mean, the list is so. And some of my friends that we do these anthologies, we always have in the same. Um, oh, we have Anna Tambor. Anna Tambor sent me a whole like three things. Anna Taborska sent me some stuff. Billy Martin, gave me permission to republish the story, the title story from The Devil You Know, right? Which
that's
is about Michael Bulgakov's cat, on from the Master and Margarita.
that
And
was one of my favorite books growing up.
yeah,
I just
it's a great novel, right?
not a lot of people know it, but it did wonderful things to my mind. Probably too young to read it, but yeah,
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
that's one
Well,
great.
you're
Right?
you're you're never too. I mean, so like I don't know. So what were your like favorite books, growing up? Like what were the ones that really like indented your imagination?
Oh, well, I always say that I trace back the reason I love and I write horror because I grew up on Grimm's fairy tales,
Oh yeah.
like original, not Disneyfied version,
Right.
that of Hans Christian Andersen, of Oscar Wilde. Um, so that was very significant. And we already mentioned Master and Margarita.
Yeah.
Uh, I read a lot of classics. I actually read a lot of classics. It all kind of melted together and shaped my brain. I don't think
hmm
I started reading horror until I was in my 20s, but I seriously consider those Grimm fairy tales and all those fairy tales kind of horrific. And I think it echoes in my writing. Um,
This is something that I did. It's called Fucked Up Fairy Tales, and
oh, cute.
the cover, thank you. The cover was done by Bill Plimpton,
Oh,
who's
yes, yes, yes.
nominated for the Academy Award 2 times, so we were very fortunate to get him to do my, cover.
And I should mention also, of course, Alice in Wonderland and
Alice
Peter.
in Wonderland. Me too. Yeah.
I mean, yes. And Peter Pan, I echoed in one of my stories in Ink and Blood, which is about a character, which is about a protagonist who can make, whose stories come alive for him.
Hmm.
I think any reader would want it. It's kind of any reader's dream. So this character, this a lonely kid who reads all these books, and the characters come alive to him. Like he hangs out with Peter Pan and all that. And when he tries to recreate it as an adult, he gets to hang out with Dracula, which turns out to be
Nice.
more dangerous.
Right.
So,
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
so I do nod to all those stories that I grew up loving,
Yeah.
subtly. Hopefully, people will pick up on it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say Lewis Carroll is one of my biggest inspirations, and I have several different versions of, Alice in Wonderland, including the one that was done by Ralph Steadman, and yeah, which is really fantastic.
Nice. That's
So, I'm a huge. I also, and this is something I wish, either I don't know what happened to Jasper, but I always imagine some sort of like, eldritch shit.
I think real life is so much more prosaic.
Yeah,
Regret.
it is really mundane. This is why, well, like, Clive says, we live in reality. So I'm trying to do the Clive Barker voice, the Le Fantastique. We live in reality, so this is why we have the imagination, right? He always said we'd be terribly bored, exhaustingly bored if we just had to live in reality all the time. And I think this is one of the things that I certainly share in common with a lot of, my colleagues. It's
Oh,
just,
I think that's one of the reasons I write.
yeah.
I get to go other places.
Right. And it's so one thing, and maybe you might address this or not. I've found that human nature is so inscrutable, and you never like you wind up having fights with your loved ones or your parents or whatever, that 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 never resolve. I mean, you'll sort of have these perennial issues, right? That seem to be hardwired into the architecture of your relationships. And no matter who you are or what your sexual orientation, gender, etc., it's always the same thing. People are trouble. People are hard. And and people will do crazy things that you don't ever and be very hurtful and weird to you and you never expect it and you don't know how to but when it comes to books, like they will never abuse you. Like animals, they will never abuse you. They will never hurt you. And so my dear friend Ellen Mabey has a poem where she talks where one of the lines is kiss all the spines. Kiss all the spines. And she's actually responsible for the phrase a collective paw that is in her the we put this one out um just recently. It's called Neurospicy, a Defiantly Different Anthology. Neurospicier
Hmm,
remix, and that has um
nice.
a variety of pieces. Amelie Frank, who is autistic, is a close friend of mine. Spencer Griffin is also autistic. We have a piece by Lyric Rivera, aka Neurodivergent Rebel, who's endorses me in my Substack and is a strong supporter of, um, democracy and people not being shitty to each other, right? Sandy DeLuca, who's my collaborator and two-time Bram Stoker nominee, fine artist, brilliant person. Her her work is in contained at the Brown University Special Collections. Jade Thomas is the 15-year-old daughter of Jeffrey Thomas, right?
Oh,
Right?
yeah, right.
Right? Yeah, I mean, you didn't know that there was there's a daughter too, right? Who writes the
What?
most
Not?
amazingly refined, um, complex, and sophisticated. You would think she's sort of like the Sylvia Plath of 15-year-olds. You know, she's amazing. We have a poem that I wrote called Alchemist of Sorrows after Charles Baudelaire. It was translated into Greek by Cassandra Alagoskoufi, who's a major poet in Greece, and it was read on YouTube by Dimitris Feleris from Penn, Greece. He's the vice secretary of Penn in Greece, right? So that was a huge honor. And anyway, so this piece called A Whiff of Wonder, I don't know if this is in this one, but it contains the line by Ellen Mabey, it contains the line, a collective paw. And my partner, Aaliyah Celeste Williams, and I were listening to this, and we both had the same thought. It's like a collective paw that seems to resonate with so much, getting outside of the speciesist focus, right? We're so narrow about our human world, and animals are so fucking cool. They're just there. You know, they're
Yeah,
just all around. It's like they'll just curl their tails around you. They'll give you a little stroke. You're like, oh my gosh. So and they're being kind of semi-autistic myself. I can resonate with people who are, oh yeah, oh yes, we have a piece by Lambda Award winner Jan Steckel, Lambda Award winner, like Lammy's Award winner Jan Steckel, who's also a Yale University trained doctor. You know, she's a medical doctor, and she's a dear friend of mine. And Nobel Prize for Literature nominee Ron Whitehead, who's worked with the people like the Dalai Lama and who's endorsed by the late great Hunter S. Thompson. So he wrote us an original thing, Carrie Lee Crum from the Runaways. I mean, it's a superb, superb, um, if I say so myself. Anyway, I didn't mean to derail, but because I get so excited. So the whole A Collective Paw, and we started the Pawsies. So it's also an award now.
oh, nice.
The Pawsies. And we're planning to induct Bjork too, because Bjork, so my dad he's an inventor of like unusual things. He's predicted a lot of things that were came like years later, like Google glasses, or ripped clothing. And he had, his work was in the like Atlantic Monthly and Esquire and New York Times and the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, right? And I don't remember when this was, but we have a friend who we work with, who was a friend of Bjork. And what we know from this person, his name is Michael Portnoy, better known as Soy Bomb, because of his spectacular derailment of Bob Dylan's Grammy Awards in a performance, and where he was the backup dancer for Dylan, right? And he suddenly lifts up his shirt and it's got soy bomb written on his chest, right? And kind of a Dada performance, act. And he was, I don't know what Dylan thought, but I thought it was very épate la bourgeoisie, because Dylan is such an establishment figure now. And so Michael Portnoy was given this book by a friend of Bjork's, and the friend of Bjork's said, "Oh, Bjork bought this for me as a wedding gift. It's called What the World Needs Now. It's a sort of a, it's a inventor source book by my dad, Stephen M. Johnson." And he said, I don't, my marriage broke up, so I don't want to have this book anymore because it reminds me of, it was signed by Bjork, obviously. I don't want this because it reminds me of my marriage, and I don't want that. And so he said, maybe you could use it. So here we have, like, Michael Portnoy has a signed, he has a signed copy of my dad's book, signed by Björk, Gutman's daughter, and one of the most influential people in the world. And and then and then Portnoy is like, how do I get a hold of Stephen M. Johnson? So he's frantically like looking up whatever, and then he finally finds him, and then they've worked together many, many times. And so and then Bjork to me is such a amazing person because she's so neurodivergent and so uncanny the way she comes up with these. She's her affinity seems to be with animals too. I mean, I think she's probably autistic too, and just wonderful, wonderful. Like the feelings I have for her art are so she's so wholesome. So I really love, excuse me, Bjork. And this whole magical thing about Nocturnicorn books, most of us are neurodivergent. Some of us are queer. Some of us don't even drive. We're so neurodivergent. Ellen maybe hates to drive. And she's kind of, yeah, wow. So, yeah. And, that's something we have in common with Richard Modiano, who is also, one of our authors. And he was like the executive director of Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center, which is where people like Amanda Gorman came up, through Amanda Gorman, the, Youth Poet Laureate of the United States. So it's sort of it's more than just a it's more than just an imprint. It's a family. We're really a family. So I have a strong feeling about you, that you are that I always think that people arrive in my life for a reason, and it's very, very specific types of people are drawn to us. There are people who are attracted to the anthologies because you're going to be in the company of legends like Ramsey Campbell and Jonathan Maybury and Graham Masterton and hopefully, fingers crossed, Clive Barker. We even have a William S. Burroughs piece we're publishing, William S. Burroughs piece. The um so the spirit is so infectious. That because we're very gentle people, like none of us, Ellen maybe is one of the most gentlest people I've ever met. I get kind of protective of her. She was called the giggling goddess. People like Henry Rollins. Henry Rollins is in love with her. Maxine Cervenka. In fact, her book. This is I feel so much affection for her. Her book. This is The Cowardice of Amnesia, right? And this is my lovely friend, you know, the Ellen Mabey.
Yeah.
The 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 author photo was done by, okay, I'll just give you a hint. They were they're in a lot of David Cronenberg films, and they were in The Lord of the Rings. They played one of the most important, roles in The Lord of the Rings. Um,
I'm not gonna figure it out.
Viggo, Viggo Mortensen.
Viggo Mortensen, yes, I
Viggo
did.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Viggo Mortensen did the cover art and photography. It was published by 21361, which is the birth date of one Henry Rollins,
Oh, nice.
right? Edited by Exene, right? Edited by Exene. So yeah, I mean, like, I guess the downside of Nocturnicorn books is like, yeah, we're not going to be paying people advances. We're not going to be paying them, HWA, pro rates. We're not going to be paying any cents a word. And that is just a fact. But of the literally hundreds, I'm just making sure that my books don't fall. Literally hundreds of writers that we've worked with, and we've worked with the best. Nobody has ever complained. I mean, nobody's ever complained. I mean, people might say, "Oh, I'm not giving you my novel," you
Yeah.
know, but that's I'm like, okay, so that doesn't really matter, and it's certainly, people are kind of like um excited about our causes, like our we're not terribly, it doesn't always seem terribly practical either. It's more like I think people are excited about, working with us because it's sort of all the reasons you went into writing in the first place, and the opportunity to connect with, I mean, I don't know how to say this without giving it away, and I don't want to get in trouble, but there's the one really, really famous uh, publisher who makes people pay money to join their Patreon, and then to enter contests, which they can't access the content unless they pay $10 a month for the to and then to be in sort of to be mentored by or to take workshops with Bram Stoker award-winning authors, let's say. I mean, I would do one-on-one workshops with people for very, very, eh, see, it's so like, we're not mercenary and maybe we don't have any money, but what we sort of make up for it, in fact, that people are like, like these table of contents are absolutely unique. I mean, yes, you could be in a book with Clive Barker, Stephen King, Peter Straub, the late great Peter Straub, Poppy Z. Bride, Caitlin R. Kiernan, all these, John Langan, all these people, Gemma Files, whatever. But you're not going to be in an anthology with all those people and David J. Haskins and Jarboe, right? This is unique.
Yeah.
It's absolutely unique. And so, because these people are excited to be on board with us. In fact, we're like, Jarbo even has us on her official website as sort of, like, in the same paragraph as research publications, which is kind of like street cred. You cannot, that is ultimate street cred. I mean, research publications, who we also publish.
Nice.
Veil too. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm randomly babbling, but
I think you're doing a great job of representing your
thank
craft.
you. And then
And
we have, people like friends like, Patrick Califia. I mean, my beautiful friend Patrick Califia, and it's just like, who has a really hard time. He was disabled, and has a lot of, and got, queer bashed a lot, and it's just like, I love this man, so what are you going to do, right? Is you have passion and you want to have an outlet, and I have, and the ability to bring people together and to create a vehicle
yeah,
for whatever people want to do. I think that sort of, like if you wanted to write something, I know you have all these options, and I'm just saying, but if you wanted to say, put out a short story collection of things that nobody else is going to touch, if you had something that was absolutely unique, or was a passion project, you said, I want to do X, Y, or Z. This I want to do an experiment. I want to do something, some forbidden corner of the Dalia verse that nobody else will touch. You come to me. I will hire our guy, Adrian Baldwin, who is a writer. He's a TV writer for the BBC, an award-winning novelist, and he does all of the graphics and he designed he designed the logo for Phantasmagoria magazine.
Wow.
Right. So he's our guy. He does all of our stuff. If you want to know why it looks so beautiful, Adrian Baldwin, absolutely a mate.
It definitely draws the eye. When I first saw the cover for Le Fantastique, I was like, oh,
Yeah. And this is another thing which kind of was a little bit freaky. There's a lot of interesting freaky synchronicities that happen with us. For example, I was approached by this guy, Randy Focaccio. It was like, it's like Randy Focaccio sounds like something right out of a Dario Argento movie. It sounds like like one of the actors or the set designer or something, like Sergio Stivoletti, Randy Focaccio, right? Music by Claudio Simonetti, who I also interviewed in for Zero Tolerance magazine, So, you know, Claudio Simonetti, Randy Focaccio, right? And he's a huge, like Gemma Files. He's a fan of Clive Barker, and his artwork is very Barker-esque. And he approached me and he said, "I would love to submit some your work for you to consider for this artwork to for the cover." And I said, "Okay, let me check this out." And I was like, "Holy smokes. Holy smoke. It looks so." First of all, I loved the kind of androgynous Dennis Cooper meets David Bowie um, torn open clockwork mechanism, um, sort of whatever, and whatever, um, transgendered, like you really cannot tell. I love the fact you couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman or whatever it was. And I said immediately, I want that one. I want that for the cover. And we were talking, we spent about an hour on Zoom and we were just talking about people we knew and whatever. And we were talking about where he lived. He lives in Silver Lake, California, Southern California. And I was like, oh wow, I knew Gaton Damone, right, from Christian Death and what's her with uh, Shadow Project, right, and lovely person, Gaton Damone. And she lived in Silver Lake. I said, Gatan Damon? He says, not as much, but my mate over here is, Ann Magnuson. I was like, what? Get out. No way, you're and she says, yeah, we talk all the time. She's my neighbor. I'm like, okay, so could you, because I've been trying to I was like, could you talk to Ann Magnuson? Could you just say, hey, you know, just like a blurb or just a few words for the Bowie book, just whatever, what it was like, dancing like a new wave slut to Bela Lugosi's Dead in the Hunger, right? Could you just like just a few words, But I figured that Anne maybe was too busy. So she did say one thing. I tagged her on one of the because I'm so ambitious, right? I was like, I gotta have it all. So I was like, I tagged her on one of my posts for the Bowie book, and it's like Anne Magnuson, and she's like, very cool. So then I took that and I turned it into a blurb, and it's like very cool. Anne Magnuson, musician, actress, you know, um, new wave slut, the hunger, right?
that's
That's all you have
awesome.
to do, right? I had a few message exchanges with Patti Smith about the Burroughs book, and you know, which it doesn't look like she's going to be contributing, but she said, "Oh, it sounds like a fascinating project." So I turned that into a blurb. Why not? People give you these things and they're gifts and to use, right? So, and obviously, like John Shirley, Alex S. Johnson is the Baudelaire of our time. of course, he knows that I'm going to use that for the rest of my career. You know,
Naturally.
naturally, just like Ralph Waldo Emerson gave, Whitman, like, I greet you at the beginning of a glorious career, like he had that, stamped in gold in every edition of Leaves of Grass, even the ones that Emerson didn't approve of because of the overt homosexuality. And then obviously things like it's so iconic. It just reminds me of, I have seen the future of horror and his name is Clive Barker. It has that level of prestige to it.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a dream blurb.
It
I've
is a
always
dream blurb.
I've always been a blurb collector. That was
Yeah,
one thing I knew I wanted on my books, even when I
right.
started writing. So I always had good blurbs, and now they're getting better and better, and it's very, very rewarding to see. And some of them are just wild reaches, like completely wild. I published something rather different. I published a neo-noir dark comedy called Do You Know
Mm,
Coffin Man? It's literally a murder mystery with baked goods. Talk about weird corners of
I
Dalia, but
love it.
that's very weird. That came out this year from Space Boys Books, and
Nice.
I wanted a blurb from a writer who I think is funny because this is the funniest thing I've published in long
Right.
form. So I reached out to Ed Ashton, who writes hilarious science fiction. And of course, everybody knows who he is now because his novel Mickey 7 was adapted into a movie, Mickey 17.
Wow.
That's this big movie, and it was in the theaters and everything. So I had my publisher reach out to him, and shockingly, he got back and he
Wow.
liked it, and that went on the cover. It's a highly recommended thing.
So
And
cool.
yeah, I think that was actually before the movie. So with the movie, it was like
Wow. Oh,
definitely.
oh, speaking of which, okay, so this still freaks me out to this day, and I'm not going to go and reach for my copy because I have copies. I have a little room here, and my stuff is all in here, and I have my 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 publications of this is just it's not even remotely all my publications, but my magazine publications is like this tall, you know, the magazines because I'm so ambitious and I've been at this for 30 years. So, but one of the magazines, this will blow your mind. Okay, so initially when Joe Hill wanted to, he wanted to be published. He knew he was ready to be published, but he didn't want people to think, oh, it's Stephen King's son, whatever. He just he wanted to do it on his own terms. So he changed his name to Joe Hill, famously, right? And he published in a couple of magazines, first Palace Corby, and his bio was total bullshit. It was just um like he would just say, my first novel was about a necrophiliac pedophile who collects, whatever, uh, Iron Maiden albums or something like that. It was just totally obviously phony, right? The only thing that was consistent was Joe Hill, and he published two short stories before he came out with like Nos 482 and Heart-Shaped Box and all those, great books. One of the magazines that he published with was called Implosion Magazine. And I was heavily featured in that. They were the American publisher for Blood Songs magazine, which came out originally out of Australia, and they had original work by, Ed Lee and Poppy Z. Bright, Ramsey Campbell, all the people contributed to that one because it was the only game in town as far as extreme horror. And um, so so there's that. I have a extremely rare. I have several copies of the mint condition copies of the extremely rare publication where I also interviewed uh, the late underground filmmaker Joe Christ, who was married to Nancy A. Collins, as well as uh, Kirby Dick, who was an amazing filmmaker, and he made this film about that masochist, the super masochist Bob Flanagan, right? Who was in Nine Inch Nails' "Happiness and Slavery" video, right? And then he's become very famous. It's become a big deal. So I wrote so many stories and articles for Implosion that the editor said had my name up above everybody else and said we should really call this the Alex S. Johnson issue, right? And then the next down the line, the next name in this table of contents is Joe Hill.
That's awesome.
Right? It's just like this, it's this bizarre kind of synchronicity of history that I'm all over this one magazine that just happens to be the second published story of Joe Hill. And this is one of the things I'm also very proud of the fact that I was the one who commissioned. Have you heard of Paula D. Ashe?
It sounds familiar, but you know
Uh,
my thing with names.
right. Paula D. Ashe is a composition instructor in Indiana, and she also is on the okay. So the Clive Barker connection. She's a self-described Hellraiser obsessive, and her voice commentary. You know Eric LaRocca, right? Eric LaRocca. Yeah, yeah, of course, right? So she and Eric LaRocca are provide the commentary, the queer commentary on the Arrow Films release of Hellraiser.
That's where I know the name from. I saw it in his posts. Yes.
Exactly. So we were friends for a long time we're all published by uh, um, James Ward Kirk, who was one of the first people, in fact, first person to publish Alessandro Manzetti.
Nice.
Right. And so, and I was one of the first people to commission Paula D. Ashe to write. So I did this thing called Axis of Evil, a heavy metal horror anthology. I had original work by people like Lucy Taylor, Sephora Giron, um, uh, you know, a lot of really, really big names. Del James was a contributor, from, Guns N' Roses and and then I did a sequel called Axis of Evil 2, Rise of the Metal Gods. And for this one, I was like, hey, Paula, I know you're a huge metalhead. She's a huge metalhead. And she's got all the right musical taste. I was like, could you write me a story, please? And she said, of course. So, and then because of her fascination with the kind of Barker-esque, whatever. She wrote this amazing story called "All the Hellish Cruelties of Heaven," and in the version that we published in Axis of Evil is much longer and much more metal than the one that she later collected into the collection We Are Here to Hurt Each Other, which came out in 2022. It was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award and it won the Shirley Jackson Award
I've
for
heard of it.
best collection of the year 2022. And so I also interviewed her for that for my blog, the Small Bear Review. And so anyway, and I'm republishing that story because it is extremely Barker-esque. I'm republishing that story in the Barker book, and I'm also with, permission, I'm republishing Lucy Taylor's Extremo Files, which was also in the original Axis of Evil. So it's a little piece of cultural history too, because where these stories originated from, right? The Axis of Evil anthology, which was listed by Fearsome Fiction magazine as one of the top 13 heavy metal horror books ever published. And I'm thinking, so that is in the company of things like, you know, like David J. Skow's, oh, it's in the company of Grady Hendrix. It's in the company of Joe Hill. I'm like, so our little Axis of Evil, it made it. We also got a rave review from Cemetery Dance magazine for Thunderstruck, a dark poetry collection, which is a very pagan, very witchy, um, dark poetry collection I did with Sandy DeLuca and my dear friend and partner, Alea Celeste Williams, aka Pickles. So it sounds like I'm just touting my own stuff, but I mean, I think you can appreciate how wonderful it is. You work your ass off, you are ambitious, but you do all the work. And then, you get these incredible publications and blurbs and I do, and it's like so like you just came out of nowhere. You've been writing for 4 years um, and you discovered you had an ambition to be a writer. What is the nature of your writing ambition? In other words, what kind of impact do you want to have on readers and the publishing world?
Um, well, eventually, I want to be described as a bastard child of King and Jackson. Um, and yeah, I think that would probably. I don't even know if that would satisfy it.
I,
I
I
think
mean, I mean, I could do that for you today, but yeah, I mean, I want you to be described as the bastard child of King and Jackson by Stephen King. I want that for you.
yeah,
Or
yes, that would
or
be it.
or, or Clive Barker. I want that for you, right?
Thank you. I mean, I read so much. I still read. I read less now because the writing kind of takes over.
Hmm.
But before I was a writer, I reviewed a lot. I do all my reviewing anonymously, so I still do. But yeah, I was up. I on a good month I would read about 40, 50 books to review.
Wow.
So I knew what I was up against. I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to do something different. I knew
Yeah.
standards, and I wanted to do that and better. I was seeing a lot of cliches. I was seeing a lot of recycled tropes. I wanted to write something completely original. I understand it may not initially sell as well as some of those tropes and cliches. Um, I basically set out to write the books I want to read. I am still doing that. I don't plan my books. I don't create storyboards. I don't do any of that. I sit down and write. I've recently completed on a dare to myself 100,000 word novel without taking any notes whatsoever, just keeping it all in my head. Mind you, I still have to go back and edit it, and for all I know, it's a mess, but I did it. And it's always exciting to me because it's not planned. I
Hmm.
let my characters roam. I think Simone de Beauvoir said that the characters need to have their freedom. She called it something like characterological freedom.
I love Simone de Beauvoir. Yeah, she's my heart. Yeah.
So the characters need a room to breathe. All my characters get a lot of room to breathe. They get a lot of room to roam. They just sometimes they get out of control, but it's never not exciting. It's never not fun for me. And I have a friend who is an author, wonderful author, one of my favorite authors actually. And he says, if you're not having fun writing it, how are people going to have fun reading it? So that's
Very,
what I'm
very,
trying
very
to do.
true.
I'm hoping people will have half as much fun reading my work as I have writing it.
Yeah.
And aside from that, of course, fame, fortune, critical acclaim,
Yeah.
movie adaptation. Definitely, I'm a huge movie buff, so I
Me,
don't think I'm
me,
going to
me
stop
too.
until I see it on screen. But yeah, I
Goals,
think
right?
that's
Goals.
goals.
Yeah. So,
Goals.
so from the acclaimed from the critically acclaimed novel by my Mia Dalia. Is it Dalia or Dalia? Dalia.
Dali,
Dalia
Dali.
by Mia Dalia from the critically acclaimed um, novel by Mia Dalia, the bastard child of Shirley Jackson and Stephen King, says Clive Barker. Right, and then and that would be on the trailer, right? Right. And
Yeah.
then okay, so who do you want in your films?
Um, I was asked that once and I
Hmm.
completely blanked and I never forgave
Yeah,
myself for it.
right.
But um, I'm hoping Guillermo del Toro. I vibe with his aesthetic. I think he
Yes.
would direct it well. And for actors, I just have way too many options. But I do often write with actors in my head
Okay.
as because yeah, I wrote some of my novels that I literally cast. I occasionally also cut trailers for them in my head, and I have songs that I like.
Oh
Like
yeah, me too. Me too.
my novels get a song or two songs usually that comes with it. It's very helpful. Like I think Haven had a very distinct song. It had a remake of the thing with names. It had a remake of End of the World that Billie Eilish and her brother did,
Oh
but it's
yeah.
an older song from the 90s. It's the last 5 minutes of the world, something like that. It's very, very beautiful. I thought it was perfect for the backstory for the novel, and it just kept playing in my head as I wrote it. And that's my first big novel, big-ish. It's the first novel that's in the libraries, I guess. So that's another measure. I grew up in libraries. I wanted my work in libraries. Like, so that's important. Like anybody can get their work on Kindle, on
Yeah.
Amazon. I wanted it widely distributed in many formats so people can read it or listen to it or anything like that.
That's I'm wishing that for you and manifesting that. I got like, believe it or not, this is really wild. So Jeffrey Thomas, right?
Yeah, I got him.
Okay, so yeah, so his brother Craig Thomas is the chief librarian at Harvard's Widner Library. Um, and he acquired two of my books, including the Doom Hippies, Volume 1, for the Widner Library, which means I'm in there with like Shakespeare, you know, and it's just right, like Shakespeare. So, I mean, I will probably never see, because of politics, I will never see, a Stoker's, but you never know. But I probably won't. But I get to be in books with Charles Bukowski and Allen Ginsberg, and I get to be in Harvard, you know. So this is really goals. So okay, so one of our contributors is named Rior Kiziaki, Rior Gregorets Kiziaki. I don't know how to pronounce it, but he and Barker were going to make Mr. Be Gone back in 2013. And one of his, I think you'd really look up Rior Kiziaki on YouTube. He's got several of his films, little short films, very, very surreal, very David Lynch, very unique, beautiful, very, very surreal kind of transgressive films. And one of his shorts was, the music was by um, one of the guys from Tangerine Dream, from Christopher Franca from Tangerine Dream. What I would imagined, I'm always imagined my films with the music like and I would always like for instance, for me, it's Dario Argento, or David Cronenberg equally. Music by Goblin, right?
Nice.
Right? And starring Ozzy Argento, Christopher Walken, and let's see, who do I really like? and Fairuza Balk. I just want Fairuza Balk to be in one of my movies.
So eclectic. I
I
appreciate that.
yeah, it's
That's,
just like who doesn't love Fairuza Balk? I'm sorry, but you'd have to be
I mean, everybody has seen The Craft, right?
everybody's seen The Craft.
Everybody has seen The Craft. It's one of those movies you can just track back, and everybody's like, "Yeah, I've seen that."
Yeah.
So
And
that works.
what was what was like movies that you remember where you were and what it was that had such an impact. Like I remember some films that had an extreme impact on me and my writing, Evil Dead 2, Reanimator, Hellraiser, and um, uh, and From Beyond, I think, were some of the and uh, Peter Jackson's Meet the Feebles, which is an extremely weird
God,
film.
yes, it's so very weird. I have a really like a visceral connection to movies, probably more so than books, as
Mhm.
in I remember movies' names
Yes.
and dates and all that. So, well, for Barker, obviously it was Candyman. Although I have to say I'm a huge fan of Nightbreed.
Mm,
And that line, something about when we dream, we're monsters,
mm,
we fly.
yes.
I love that. The Median, I mean, it's just haunting. But my taste in movies range. I mean, I love Psycho, the original Psycho. I think it's one of the best movies ever made. I think it's just near perfect. But then I like small movies, but I can also go, like, I remember seeing the King Kong that came out in the 90s
Yeah,
and
Peter
just,
Jackson.
yeah, just being completely
Yeah.
blown away. Like, it was just such a spectacle. I'm obsessed with all things Planet of the Apes. I mean,
Okay.
just obsessed with it. But I watch a lot of movies. Now that my reading time is at a premium, it's much easier to squeeze in a movie.
Right.
It is. And every so often you just see something so original. Everything Everywhere All at Once. I saw that. That was so, so original. It's just you have to comb through a lot of
Yeah.
same, and then every so often you just find something so striking. So I could talk about movies forever, and I will remember all the titles, and I don't want
Right.
to do that too.
One of the so one of the movies and talk about obsessions. Okay, I want to talk about a movie that I've been obsessed with since I was a kid, and that film was is called Last Year at Marienbad by Alan Renee. And I first encountered it in this film like a journal about or it's actually it was a textbook about films, right? And it has this very haunting kind of imagery or this it takes place at this hotel in I believe it's in Germany, okay? And they have these geometric gardens, the topiary gardens. Now, if that sounds familiar, okay, so the tracking shots down these corridors of this hotel, or the long tracking shots, if this sounds familiar, stop me at any time. Um, it takes place in sort of this liminal world where these people are had experienced a love affair many years ago, but they're sort of almost like they're trapped in hell, and they don't remember um, how they got there. And then the same incidents are repeated, but with variations. It's a very magical and surreal film, very stately, very elegant, very sort of icy, right? And
Hmm.
formal, and everybody's dressed to the nines. It's just gorgeous to watch. Cinematography, the music, the sound directions, everything is beautiful. It was the screenplay was written by Alain Robbe-Grillet, right? And when I was an undergrad at UC Davis, he was a writer in residence. Alan Robbe-Grillet was a writer in residence there. So we were like 25 people in the entire comparative literature department, right? There's a showing, I heard, oh, there's a showing of last year at Marienbad, right? And Robbe-Grillet is going to be there. And so this was like decades before DVDs and before, commentary DVDs. So we got live commentary in French from Alan Robbe-Grillet about last year at Marienbad. And you right, which is like one of the most influential films in cinema history. It's frequently cited as the main inspiration for The Shining.
Oh, nice.
So if you haven't seen Last Year at Marienbad, I strongly recommend it, and you'll be haunted by it. You'll be like, "Oh, I'm so glad Alex turned me on to this," because, you know, it's one of those movies like I'm have a great fondness for Jodorowsky, for The Holy Mountain, El Topo, this kind of incredibly dreamlike, surreal, but oddly practical, oddly realistic for all of its excess is really making it's like a poet is poetry in image, and people like you mentioned Guillermo del Toro. Also, I love Gaspar Noé, the French filmmaker, right? Enter the Void, Irreversible, so many, and Catherine Breillat, um, romance, and all those, Fat Girl. Just, I really love filmmakers who are daring, who are willing to take a chance that they'll lose the audience completely. And this is, like Lynch, of course, Cronenberg is a master, and I would watch. I think I've this is, this is one of the reasons like I will watch films over and over again, especially Scanners. But my dad was friends with Michael Ritchie. He grew up with doing scouting with Michael Ritchie, who went on to direct movies like Bad News Bears, The Island, The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy, and so many films, The Survivors, and with Robin Williams and Walter Matthau and Fletch. He made Fletch, and so oh, and the Small Bear, the my origin story of the Small Bear show. Okay, when I was born on Halloween Day, 1966, which is the year one in the Satanic calendar. So we have a friend. Uh, um, her name is uh, uh, Sharon LeVay. Okay, Sharon LeVay is the head of the international, I guess, satanic organization, the Church of Satan, right? And this is for Alex, many satanic blessings. She's also a
Oh, wow.
contributor, right? I don't know how you feel about all that, but she's a very nice person. I mean, to me, it's always been very nice. And she is a close friend of Nicole Six. That's how I know her. And so anyway, so I got a lot of teddy bears and one of them was striking because it was a Steiff bear, not this one, but it was a Steiff bear, which is the Rolls Royce of teddy bears. And it was given to me by a friend of my mother's named John Cordy. Now, may not ring a bell immediately. John Cordy made several films. He won the Academy Award for the documentary Who Are the Dipbolts. He made the film Caravan of Courage, an Ewok Adventure for George Lucas, which had uh, which was based on Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And Ewoks are basically bears, right? He
Yes.
he he made the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. He made Go Ask Alice for TV. He made Twice Upon a Time for George Lucas. which was produced by, he also came up with Omnizoetrope, right? And he was the DP on The Candidate by my dad's friend Michael Ritchie. So he also, twice upon a time, the special effects guy was a 17-year-old David Fincher, right?
Oh,
So,
that guy.
right? So you have all, so I have all this, like nobody would believe that, like okay, so connect the dots, right? That I was actual friends with Lemmy Kilmister, who he and Ozzy wrote the song Hellraiser, featured in the film Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, by Clive Barker, who was an enormous fan of William S. Burroughs, who also influenced David J. Haskins, Jarbo, um, you know, uh, worked with Graham Masterton, worked with Ron Whitehead, was a close friend of Ron Whitehead's, was a close friend of Val Vale's, inspired almost every all of our writers. And then you had like David J. Haskins wrote Bela Lugosi's Dead, which is featured in the film The Hunger, which was directed by Tony Scott, the brother of Ridley Scott, who made Blade Runner, which and then you have Paul M. Salmon, who was he was embedded in the set of Blade Runner, based on the novel by Whitley Strieber, who also collaborated with Craig Spector, who was also a friend of William S. Burroughs, and also wrote Communion, um, starring Christopher Walken, who was also in The Dead Zone, directed by David Cronenberg. And then you see where I'm going with this, who was also famous for the cowbell sketch on Saturday Night Live, which was about Blue Oyster Cult, which was a band that a lot of their lyrics are written by a certain John Shirley when they're not written by Michael Moorcock and Patti Smith, right? So you have all of these, and then David J. Haskins inspired, among other people, Bjork,
Right.
right? So you got, anyway,
Yeah, it's like a labyrinth.
it's like a
It's all
labyrinth,
it's all connected, and you could just walk around and see connections.
right?
I hate I hate to be the
You need to go. We've done this for um 2.5 hours, so I think that's
I'm
right,
on the
right about.
East
It's right.
Coast and I'm about to turn into a pumpkin.
No, that's
It's my
great. No,
pumpkin
no,
hour.
no. You've given me 2.5 hours, which is beautiful. I didn't think you were going to last this long. So you've been a lovely guest, and I really had a good
Oh,
time.
well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you. And
And
I'm looking forward to all of our collaborations.
me too. Okay, so we always do. I don't know how you feel about this, especially you don't really know me, but we always do it like a kind of a squeezy hugs, because that's just the small bear way. If you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine too. But squeezins. Okay, okay. Thank you so much, and
Yes.
and
All
we'll
right.
we'll we'll talk soon. Okay,
All right. Talk soon. Good
take
night.
care. Bye bye.